Hello and welcome to VFX Talks, a show about development and leadership in the VFX industry. My name is Alfred Lindahl, and today I'm really excited to be talking to Debra Coleman. And Debra has been working in VFX for over 25 years, starting as a runner at Cinesite, and from there she moved into compositing, ending up at DNEG, where she worked on films like Batman Begins and Iron Man 2, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, and Inception. And she stayed there for 16 years, first stepping up to be an artist manager for the 2D team, then the co-head of 2D, and finally the global head of compositing, overseeing a team of about 500 artists. And today, Debra is an accredited coach running a company called Open Frame Coaching, where she's using all that experience from being an artist and a leader to help others develop and thrive in VFX and in related industries. So, Debra, welcome to the show.
Hi, Alfred. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm super excited to have you here.
Yeah,
it feels like we've done a similar journey, but you've gone much further. You're so much further ahead of me. So it's going to be really interesting to try to pick your brain.
Yeah, absolutely.
So first, why don't you start by telling us a bit about your company and Open Frame Coaching and why you decided to start that? Why leave a good position at DNEG and do your own thing?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'd love to. So yes, I set up Open Frame Coaching in January 2021. So getting into 2 years of business now. And with Open Frame Coaching, I specialize in coaching and group coaching, leadership training, mainly for the VFX and animation industries, games industry and other creative industries also. Why leave a safe job? It's a very good question. I was fortunate to have so many years at DNEG, and when I joined DNEG, the company was small and I was there through huge periods of growth, so I was able to grow with it. And I think for me, I need to always be learning and growing, not in a fast pace. I've sort of noticed every 3 years I'm ready for a big new challenge, and I'd reached that point. So I'd been in my position for many years. It's not to say it was ever easy. There were challenges every day, there were problems to solve every day, but I had reached a point where it was a little bit like Groundhog Day. Yes, we've got another million projects to deliver, that kind of thing. I'd done what I wanted to do, I guess, and I was ready for another challenge. And I trained in coaching while I was working, initially thinking it would, I guess, investing in my own career development, but I wasn't expecting to leave and be self-employed at all, never part of the plan. But then also we had COVID. And I think with COVID, probably like a lot of people, I had a rethink. So it worked on 2 levels. One, everyone was at home using Zoom. So that made coaching more accessible. So for me as a coach, I felt like, I can reach clients anywhere in the world, rather than just geographically. And also just having a rethink myself about, the age I am, where am I in my career? Am I enjoying what I'm doing? And realizing how much I was enjoying coaching, and just thinking, it's not exactly now or never, but you've only got one life. So if you really want to try something, try it. It was a big decision to make. But really, it came to me when I was on holiday in the Peak District. I think I had some time and space to think in nature, and that's just when I thought, I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna try it and see what happens.
Yeah, awesome. And how did your development at DNEG go when you started to have more responsibility? You became an artist manager, and then you had 500 people under you. Like, how did that change happen? Was it all natural? You just ended up there, or was it like, oh shit, What am I doing?
I mean, it was over many years, so I didn't go straight from compositing to managing 500 people, but I did go straight from compositing into the artist manager role, which was new at the time, so nobody had done it yet. So I think I was able to help define it, but I say that was a case of, trial by fire, just sort of following your instinct, do what you think needs doing. I had great mentors, so Vic Wade, Chris Byrne, Griff Owen. I had really great heads of 2D that I worked with over the years, and other mentors in the business as well, our head of HR, our COO. So lots of people to learn from in a new role that I don't know how well defined it was. So I learned by doing. There were a few awkward, difficult moments along the way. Thankfully, I always felt supported and that my line manager had my back and believed in me. So there was room to learn from mistakes I made. But overall, I think I just trusted my instinct. Sort of feel it's important to have integrity when managing, well, in life, but when managing people. So a combination of learning by doing, having really good support and good mentors, trusting my instincts. But yeah, it was a steep learning curve, but it was something I wanted to do. I was, again, comes back to that. I was looking for a new challenge. I'd been compositing for a long time. I was a senior artist. I didn't want to move into supervision. What was my next challenge going to be? So having that opportunity to be an artist manager really suited me. So I was up for it. I was up for the challenge of doing something new. And I usually just trust that I'll do my best and I'll learn as I go. So I think I've relied on that throughout, really.
That sounds like a good strategy.
Yeah.
And I remember my first day as an artist manager at Important Looking Pirates, because they didn't have anyone in that position before either. And the first day I was like, okay, what am I doing now? No, no guidelines, nothing, no one to tell me what to do.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
It worked out.
I mean, thinking back to actually starting in that position, I felt really nervous because I was going from being one of the team to being the manager of the team. And I felt very nervous, actually, like even going in and talking to people felt, when you've got the butterflies in your tummy, that kind of thing. Thinking back to starting out. But again, I wanted to do it and I was doing it in good faith. So sort of reminding myself, well, this is what you want to do. You've got to push yourself out there and go and do it. And I always felt quite supported and welcome. So that really helped. Yeah.
But how did it work when you became like the boss of your peers? That's something I've been talking a bit about before, and that it like the imposter syndrome and stuff like that. And how do you keep your relationship with people when you suddenly are supposed to tell them what to do, or maybe you're not telling people what to do, but you're helping them out or whatever. How did that work for you?
Yeah, I think it's a little tricky to navigate. I think I've sort of witnessed, I think it's quite common if you go from being one of the artists to then being the lead or the supervisor or being artist manager. It can be a little bit tricky, but I think ultimately just be yourself. Respect that you're in a different role, so you have got different responsibilities, but you're still you, and you've been entrusted with that position of responsibility. So again, there's a reason you've been promoted into that role. So sort of trusting in that, and I think ultimately being yourself with people, really. Try it. If you are feeling awkward, you can either say, oh, it's a bit awkward, isn't it? Or just sort of, I don't know, try and overcome it. But I think there's different degrees with like close friendships remained close, fortunately. But as you become more senior, like having to be mindful of the fact there's some information that I'm being trusted with that I can't just share because someone's also my friend. But then I think that was always understood as well. Friends wouldn't ask me to spill the beans, or they'd understand if I just kept quiet, if you see what I mean. Yeah. How about for you?
Oh, it's good. Yeah, it was a bit weird, but fortunately I left ILP as an artist, and then I went and did something different, and then I came back in this role. And it wasn't really, I was more of a support for the head of the department. So my artist manager role was more to support the head of comp and the head of light, and so I wasn't really the line manager. I was more as a coach. So I dodged that a bit. But something that I've seen in many leaders, what I appreciate is when they're honest and say, I don't know what I'm doing, but let's just try to figure it out together, and not pretending that, okay, now I'm a lead, now I know how things are supposed to be done. Like that's a really big turn off for me when someone comes in and pretends. Like, it's so easy to see through that, and you know them. It was the artist that was working next to you the week before, so
yeah. I think there's an element of presenting with confidence and balancing that with being able to say, I don't know, but I'll find out and I'll get back to you. And I think that's always true. I think you need to have you need to reassure people that you're the right person in the role. There's a reason you've been given this new responsibility. Sort of trust me, I'm here for you. I'm going to do the best I can for you. That's why this role exists. But if I don't know something, I'm going to find out and I'm going to come back to you. And I think that's true of artist managers or supervisors.
Yeah, that's a good point. Not just to go in there and say, I don't know what I'm doing, but to actually, I'm going to try my best and figure stuff out and see what I can do. Cool. But going back a bit to your business, and what type of people are you working with, and in what ways can you help? Who is coaching for, basically?
Yeah, good question. Who is coaching for? I think it's a really good question. It's one I reflect on quite a bit as a coach. And I think I've reached the conclusion coaching is for anyone who's ready to make a change. So it doesn't work if you're kind of like, oh yeah, impress me. What can you do to fix me, kind of thing, or make it all better? Coaching is really, the actual change sits with the individual, and as a coach, you're there to facilitate that change. To sort of create an environment where you can help that person figure out what they want to do next, really, in whatever the scenario is, and then how to do it or how to move towards it. So I think it suits anyone who's ready to make a change and needs help with that, really. People I tend to work with, there's a few different lines, that's the wrong word, but a few different sort of areas I work in, I guess. So I've got my one-to-one coaching sessions, and they're roughly a 50-50 split between VFX or animation professionals coming to me themselves, so people who are self-funding, who are looking for that coaching independently, and then also providing it at VFX studios. And so in that case, the studio themselves identify which employees they think would benefit from some coaching, and we have a set number of sessions. But either way, it's a case of trying to help people be clear about what are they looking to get out of the coaching. So if you're coming to me as a coach, why? What would you like to change? What will be different at the end of the sessions? And then I do have quite a bespoke approach. So I don't have a set program. It's not this is my, this is how to do this, because everyone is different. And I think that's where I still get the creativity that I used to get in VFX is figuring out how I can support each different person with what they bring into coaching. Yeah. To answer your question.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I guess to
And
add,
what?
Alfred, so the one-to-one coaching, and then also I do group coaching as well. I really enjoy working with groups as well as individuals. I think with groups, there's a different energy. People can learn from each other. I quite like the fact, or I like to encourage that group to form quite a creative network, a sort of support network for each other after we've been working together. And I like the fact it's a different dynamic every time. Questions come up, so I'm kind of, need to be able to answer questions as they arise, which I find interesting. So I love working with groups as well.
Yeah. And what types of groups are that?
Again, sometimes it's for organizations. Mostly it's for organizations. Sometimes I might offer a group workshop for individuals to sign up for. So I've done things around time and stress management, around work-life balance, and leadership skills as well. They're the key ones I've been doing.
Yeah. Nice. I would love to attend some of those.
Yes, yeah.
You can never
come along
get too
time.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you do these one-on-one coaching and people come to you and you ask them, what do you need coaching for? Like, what do you want me to help with? What are the most common problems or like obstacles people are facing?
I am seeing themes. I am, obviously it's different for everyone, but I am seeing themes. I think quite often if somebody's newly promoted, so they've been given a new responsibility, and that's often when the self-doubt really kicks in. If people are newly promoted and they're lacking confidence, or sometimes they're wondering how to make themselves heard because they're going to be in a situation with more senior people, for example. So it can be around confidence, communication skills, even roles and responsibilities, like how do you even know what you're meant to do? And if not, what can we do about that? So that's one area. I guess linked to that is leadership skills as well. I also have people coming to me when maybe they've been working in the industry for quite a long time, they're pretty established, and they're wondering what's next. Maybe 10, 15, even 20 years into their career, they're kind of like, okay, I'm here. What do I do next? Yes, that's quite common. I work with people who are quite stressed and overwhelmed. So they love what they do, but they're noticing maybe physical symptoms, noticing the warning signs and thinking, I need to make a change. So work with them about the stress management, really. I think they're probably the main things.
Yeah. And when we talk about people, that's a pretty common problem in the industry, I guess, because a lot of people are so passionate about what they're doing, and it's a pretty unique problem that you don't want to leave work, you don't want to go home. But how do you coach someone? How do you help someone with that kind of problem? Like to find balance but I'm enjoying work, so why should I go home? But then you start to get some kind of symptoms, or after 10 years you feel like, oh shit, I put everything else on pause, but now I'm here. Like, what do I do now? How do you coach someone to find some healthy balance?
I think, again, if they've come to me, they've recognized something needs to change, and that's essential for coaching. Quite often I start by, we take quite a step back and step back and look at, okay, where are you? What's going on in all the areas of your life? So sort of taking a holistic look. I tend to say I'm a career coach, and I work with VFX professionals, but essentially we're one person living one life. So often it's necessary to just step back and look, okay, what's going on in my life? What are the most important areas? What's my level of satisfaction? What do I need to change? That really helps. Understanding what's important to you at this point in your life, because these things change as we grow older as well. So what's important to me now? What brings me joy? What energizes me? And looking at the very basics. So are you looking after your health and mental well-being? How's your sleeping? How's your nutrition? How are you getting some exercise? So those basics as well. Sometimes I do a stress health questionnaire, to cover the physical side of things, so that people understand the symptoms. There's lots of different things to look at, but mainly what's important to me. Am I getting enough of it? What can I do to make a change, really? Yeah. And actually thinking about it, also thinking about your support network. So I don't know, it's that combination of we're each responsible for ourselves. So only I can look after my own health. No one else is going to do that for me. But remembering we are part of a team, we do have a support network, both in work and outside of work. So working with people to recognize they're not alone, and drawing upon that really, or building it if they feel that maybe, because sometimes that can feel like it's dropped away. So sort of rebuilding that support network as well, so that you're not on your own, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's something that I can relate to especially when I was like feeling the symptoms of depression, and I felt completely alone, even though I had tons of artists around me, but I felt like there's no one I can talk to. But then later, when I came back as an artist manager, and I talked to a lot of people about my depression, and then they were like, they could start opening up, like, oh, why didn't no one talk about this before? So I think that's a big thing, that you think you're alone and feeling in a certain way, but then when you actually start to talk to people, you realize that, oh, they're struggling in similar ways or in other ways, and you can support each other.
Yeah.
That's when you're in that, like, when you are like, you get so much into your head that it can be hard to reach out and talk to people. And
definitely, it's unfortunate that when you most need to reach out is when it's hardest to. So I guess we can all be better at checking in with people as well. Like, if when we're doing okay, checking in with people, are they doing okay? Are they really doing okay? Because the statistics around mental health are pretty shocking. Very likely that someone nearby is probably struggling at some point. But that's why things like this podcast are a great idea, Alfred. I think there's a lot of stigma around depression, around mental health. I think it's improving. I think it's being talked about more, which is very welcome. I think people do suffer in silence. There's a tendency to. So I think the more people are able to talk about their own experiences, the better, because it makes us realize, oh, it's not just me. I'm not alone. And if they've got through it, I can get through it as well, which I think is a really important message when you're in a particularly dark spot.
Yeah. And can you see any, like, I don't know how to put this, but with our industry, with like creative people, and it seems to be a lot of introverted people, and also, like, my therapist has talked about the connection, the correlation between creativity and depression, that a lot of like great geniuses throughout history have been plagued by depression and anxiety. Like, do you see any connections between, like, do we have more creative, like, geniuses that are plagued by this, or do you think it's it's different from other industries. I don't know how much insight you have in other industries, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I'm pretty much embedded in the VFX industry too, so I don't have a huge amount of comparison other than through family and friends. But it's a good point, isn't it, about creativity and depression? There's certainly very many famous people that provide examples of that. I think sort of in parallel, I'm noticing correlations between where people are feeling overwhelmed or stressed or working really crazy hours, hard to switch off. Quite often, many people that I'm coaching are perfectionists. So they have this perfectionist tendency. And I think that might be very indicative of the VFX industry. I mean, it makes sense. But I think I encounter a high percentage, higher than the average percentage of people who are perfectionists. So interesting to bring that to their attention and see by recognizing that, what might they want to change. So recognizing it's also part of their success, but how is it impacting them? What might they want to change? Yeah.
And how do you coach someone with that? Because I'm struggling with that myself. Like, how would you coach me to not be like, I have a hard time showing something that isn't finished. Like, but I'm gonna polish this a bit more. And like, what would you say to me?
I think there's a few different approaches you can take. I think quite often, again, taking that step back and realizing, our time is a finite resource. So if you're spending time perfecting this one thing, you're not spending time on these other things. So if you want to not only be working all the time, but also want to spend time in other areas, recognizing, well, if my time is spent here, it's not spent here. Or if I want to spend time here, I can't spend as much time here. And therefore, how important is it that this is perfect before you show it, compared to how important is it that you also have time for other things? That's just one example. Kind of trying to oversimplify something that can be quite complex. And I think with a technique you can put in place with that is to create your own accountability. So basically say, I'm going to send this to you by tomorrow. You will have this by end of day today. You will have this by Friday. And then, okay, I've made a commitment. I'm going to have to send it as good as it is, rather than working it up. I can remember when I first started compositing, like really early days compositing, I was doing a camera removal. I think it was on one of the early Mission Impossible films. And it was shot, this is shot on film, this is pre-digital, doing a camera removal from an explosion shot. And the VFX producer at CineSite, he was like, how's it coming on? How's it coming on? How's it going? I'm like, I just nearly da-da-da-da-da. And after a while, he's like, we're filming it out, and I bet it's fine. And I was like, oh no. And it was absolutely fine. Of course it was, So I could have spent, I think that was a really important lesson. It was like, it's not perfect, but it's good enough. So that was quite good to have somebody say to me, we're taking a look at it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And many times it feels like you can be stuck focusing on one thing, and then you forget that there's a big mat moving across the frame or something. Like you miss the big picture. And something I was thinking about when you talked about that, if you spend too much time here, you don't have time for the other things in life. But I guess that also applies to work. Like if you want to be a productive artist and to step up your game, then you might need to finish this, continue on something, the next shot, and then you can output much more than if you spend the entire time working on just one shot. So maybe also in the eyes of like your lead or supervisor, you're quote better artist if you just output more that aren't completely polished.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think I saw that quite often with compositors and even leads and sequence soups. You know, it's about ultimately everything needs to be finaled. So you need to final everything at a consistent quality level rather than
Yeah.
have one absolutely beautiful shot, but the other, you know, X number haven't been done. So yes, always bearing in mind that context, I guess, of this is one thing amongst many. How much time can how much time do I have to split across all the different tasks, really, in order to get them all
Yeah.
progressed? Yeah.
Yeah. And now I got to think about an experience I had when I was a new artist, and I got to animate a shot in some small commercial thing, and like I didn't know what I was doing, basically fresh out of school. But my shot was the only shot that got approved, like the first version, because the other animators were used to they always get feedback, so they show something and then they get
Okay.
feedback. And I've always thought of that as being like bad on them, that they've been too like they don't care anymore, they've been doing this for too long, they know they're gonna get feedback. But now when we're talking about it, maybe I spent 5 times as much time than I would need to finish that shot, just because I wanted to make it perfect. So maybe their approach was actually much better, more efficient, and like better for everyone.
Maybe. I think when you're starting out, and even whenever you're new, you know, new in a new contract or with a new employer, or even just joining a new show, if first impressions count. So I do
Yeah.
think there's something to be said for giving your best with your first shot you're given, because then it sets a level of confidence. I certainly used to do that when I was compositing. Whenever I joined a new show, I wanted to really make sure that the first shot I did, even if it was something, quite often it was something really simple, because in a way your new lead is testing you. They want to get an idea of
Yeah.
what you're capable of. So rather than thinking, oh God, it's just another one of these blooming, rig removals or green screen or window replacements or something, do it to the best of your ability. Do it to a high standard quickly, and then they'll go, oh, okay, she's got the basics. I'll give her something more interesting. So I
Yeah.
do think you're sort of creating an impression, and that's important to be
Yeah.
mindful of.
Yeah. And something that's also good to think about is that you can always show something and say, I'm planning to do this and that and fix that.
Yeah.
So your lead or supervisor isn't worried that,
Yeah.
is this what you're
Yeah.
proposing as
Yeah.
final?
Yeah. I guess it comes down to communication, actually, often when I'm coaching people as well. And when I was head of department, it comes down to communication. So communicating where you're at, like the status of your tasks, the status of your shots, and what you're planning. So I'm showing this because I want to get feedback. Or I think this is a presenter's final, you tell
Yeah.
me. So I think communicating, or this is taking me longer because I'm waiting on this, or I had to fix that, or this didn't line up, or but communicating that so that your production team aren't just thinking, goodness me, she's sat on a 2-day shot for 4 days now, what's she doing? I think communication is always key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you're coaching people from different companies and even different industries, what type of people, what type of personalities do you think can thrive in VFX in this case? Is there any particular types of persons, or can anyone thrive?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think it's down to one personality type at all. And actually, going back to your point before about introverts, I think we do have a really nice balance of introverts and extroverts. And I think that makes for well-balanced teams. I sort of noticed that while I was at DNEG. I don't know. I do think you have to really want to do it, because it will always be quite demanding, compared to other industries. you might be able to earn a similar salary in a different industry and not work as many hours. So I think you have to want to do it. And I think there is a certain, satisfaction or kudos, working on a film or a TV show or a game, So I do think there needs to be a genuine interest, if not love, passion, but a genuine interest. Type of person. I think it helps if you can find balance. So I think if you're able to reach a point where you're able to self-manage, because I think you can always work more, do more. There will always be, you can tinker. And even if you're not tinkering, you will always be given more shots. There's always more work to do. So I think being able to reach a point where you can self-manage so that you're not totally consumed by work. I don't know about a certain type of personality. I feel like I meet lots of different personality types. And I sort of love that about it. And I love how international it is as well. I think it's wonderful. I don't know how many other industries you get to work with so many other nationalities. And that's one of the things I've always loved about it as well.
Yeah. And the fact that you're basically only judged by your show reel. It's okay, what can you do? Doesn't matter where you're from or who you are. And I also really like the different kinds of people in VFX. It's so nice to see that some really introverted people can do their awesome stuff, and then some really extroverted people are yelling around in the other part of the office, and they're working together. And I really, really like that. But have you seen when you talked about like it's really satisfying to work on movies and see your stuff in the cinema and stuff like that, but have you found that people are also struggling with that? Because I felt a bit that, okay, I need to work on the next, like on the cooler projects. I need to step up to do that. But then I finally realized, but I'm not happy working on the big productions. I should work on small scale commercials. But that was like, it hurt to admit to myself that, okay, I'm going to let that go. I'm going to step down from that. Like, have you seen something similar in other people?
Yeah, I have. Is that noise disturbing?
No.
Okay, all right. I came to the realization that there's a kind of holy grail, holy grail of three things, which is the team, so the people you're working with, the project, so that might be the high profile film, and the shots, so the actual shot work you're given to do. And I think over time, if you can get all three, you're onto a winner. That's the best experience. But at some point, I realized that actually the team matters the most. So the people I'm working with, that's ultimately going to have the single biggest impact on my day-to-day experience for the months I'm on this project, particularly probably the production team. Production team and supervisors, that the tone that's set at the top of any project. And then probably next important is the actual task. So what shots am I being given? Are they interesting? Are they challenging? Are they boring? And then the project. So people could be very excited to hear that you're working on, some big movie, but if you're kind of bored with the shots or you're feeling really pressured, then you're not going to enjoy it. If you can get all three, awesome. But I think a lot of people come to realize it's about the team, actually.
Yeah. And now when I'm like freelance solo one-man band, I'm working alone. So maybe that says something about me. But on the other hand, I'm trying to work with great clients. So I have a lot of my old friends that I have as clients. So I get that.
Yeah.
Usually we call and just chat about life and family and stuff like that before like 5 minutes of work talk in the end.
Yeah. I think that, talking about the team, it can be the client. I'm worried about the noise in the background. Do you want me to go?
No, it's no worries.
All right.
It's
Okay.
not, you
Um,
don't notice.
yeah, I think, yeah, when I say team, it can be client. I mean, of course, I'm now working on my own. You know, I have been for almost 2 years. It's a very different experience. But again, I think actually, I really love the autonomy. I really love being my own boss. It's great. You know, I spend my time and energy where I choose to, which is wonderful. But I think building your support network again, so having people you can turn to, you can reach out to, you know, colleagues that you can reach out to for a chat or for a bit of advice. And yeah, the genuine enjoyment of the clients you work with as well. Yeah. So it's kind of finding your people, whatever your role is, finding your people, right?
Yeah. So I want to talk a bit about leadership, change subject a bit, because that's something you've been doing a lot, and now you're also coaching leaders. So what have you learned moving up through the ranks with more people, more responsibility? How have your views on leadership changed, and like from when you were starting out?
Yeah, good question. I think now that I teach leadership skills as well, I've really, and I'm drawing upon my experience. I've really realised that there's no one size fits all. You know, it's all about flexible leadership. I think really effective leadership has to be flexible.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of that, or key to that, is being authentic to yourself. So, again, if we come back to the fact that every single person is different and is an individual, who are you as a leader? You know, what is it that's important to you? What are your values? And how are you communicating that? And what do your team need from you? So, and who are they? So, knowing who's in your team, recognizing they're all different. What do they each need from you? And also, what does the whole team need from you? So, you've got to consider the individuals and you've got to consider the whole team. But I think starting with who am I as a leader, and realizing that will be different for everyone as well.
Yeah, that's something I've heard before, and like that if you actually define what are my strengths and how can I apply them as a leader, and not just try to be this type of leader that you've seen on TV or your supervisor or whoever. And that was really, really powerful when I realized, okay, but I can use how I am, use my personality to help others or empower people or lead more effectively.
Yeah.
That was a good realization.
Yeah. Yeah, I often say to people, there's a reason you've got to where you've got to. It's not about changing yourself. You know, you've reached the position you're in for good reason. You know, you've been drawing upon your strengths and your experience. So it's not about changing yourself completely, but it's almost like an audit, kind of like, okay, what am I good at? What do I want to improve on? And who am I? So what is it about me that people will want to follow? You know, what does working with me mean? What do I provide as a leader? And that's different. Yeah, it's different. But I often encourage people to think about, well, who have you loved working for? You know, who has been a brilliant leader for you? So having those role models, I'm sure we can all think of role models, and sort of think, what was it about them? And is that something that I might want to also, you know, work towards in my leadership style as well?
Yeah. So if you get someone that is an artist and want to become a lead, and you're coaching them, like, is that where you start, or how do you, like, what's the first steps for someone who wants to become a leader or a lead or some sort of leader?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I'm running a leadership skills program at the moment, and that's for a team of leaders within a business, and with them, that's very much the approach I'm taking, is starting with looking at defining your own authentic leadership style. That's the starting point, and then moving on to communication, and working with teams, thinking about who are the people in your team and what do they need from you and how can you motivate them. But I think if I'm coaching someone on leadership, we start with, okay, who are you and who do you want to be? And how are you presenting that?
Yeah. And who can become a good leader? Because I don't really see myself as a leader. I like, I have a hard time seeing me as a leader. But who can become a good leader in your opinion?
Yeah, and yet here you are, Alfred, setting up your VFX Talk podcast, putting yourself out there, reaching out to people to discuss these things and sharing that with a wider community. That is leadership. That's an example of good leadership. So who can be a leader? Who can be a leader? I think, I'm tempted to say anyone, but I think, I guess, realizing it's not about you, it's about the team. So whenever you're in a leadership role, essentially you're there to facilitate the team. So I think maybe people who are doing it purely for themselves, like for their ego, for the status, for their own satisfaction, I don't know if they'll be the best leaders, because it's not really about you, it's about the team. So in order to be a great leader, I think there needs to be an understanding of that.
Yeah, that's a good one. And maybe the hesitant leaders are the best leaders.
Yeah.
That are they don't jump to the opportunity as soon as they can. But yeah,
I guess thinking about why you're doing it. Why do you want to be in a leadership role? What are you hoping to gain from it, or what are you helping to bring to it, as well as what are you helping to gain from it? And you'd like to think there'd be a balance there of, well, I'm bringing this, and I want to gain this.
And I loved what Pietro Ponte said in his interview, that he saw the supervisor as the most generalist position. He wanted to dabble in everything, so that's why he wanted to become a supervisor, not because he wanted to lead people, but because he loves everything so much. I think that's a good example.
I think often really strong supervisors are problem solvers, as in they have a drive to find creative solutions to a problem. And again, that gets to a point where it's not you solving the problem, it's you finding the right people in your team to solve the problem and enabling them and ensuring there's the resources there to do so. But essentially, I think it's about creative problem solving. And I think the people who see it that way are the ones who are particularly successful. And strong communication skills. I think that applies to everything in life, but I guess the more responsibility you have, the better you can communicate, the easier it becomes, really.
Yeah. So you took a coaching course or at Barefoot Coaching, and what did you learn there, and how much? Because I don't really know the term coach compared to other roles. Like now I'm going to therapy, which is a lot of coaching. It's basically coaching. So what is actually coaching, and the difference between that? Because I guess a lot of what you're doing, what you're talking to people about, is very similar, because it's about dealing with your own emotions and I don't know what the question is here, but do you know what is the coaching, and what did you learn in that coaching course?
Yeah, I think there is a difference. There's some crossover. There can be crossover. So there's a difference between therapy, counselling, and coaching. But there can be some crossover. I think essentially therapy tends to be more exploring the emotions in the past. You're kind of looking back at the experiences you've had and how that's affecting your thinking and your feeling and learning from it. So unpicking it, learning from it, and maybe then learning new behaviors or new thinking patterns. Coaching tends to be more about this is where I am now and this is where I want to get to. So identifying what do you want, what is it you would like to, move
Yeah,
towards, and how can you get there. And in order to know how you can get there, you might need to go back to unpick some of that baggage in the past. What's holding you back, what things like imposter syndrome, things like the different internal voices affecting our confidence. So there's a certain amount of looking back and working through. Maybe there was a difficult, for example, maybe someone was bullied. And if we can unpick the bullying, that might really free them up to realize, actually, that's been impacting me for a long time. And now I'm free of it. I sort of realize I can let go of it and move on.
yeah,
But yeah, I'm not a therapist. And I, have great respect. I have had therapy and I have had coaching, so I can see the difference, I guess, from having had both, and they both have a
yeah,
part to play. In terms of my course, so yeah, I studied with Barefoot Coaching, would highly recommend them. I did quite a bit of research. I was considering probably for a couple of years about training as a coach, researched a number of different training providers. They have very different fees and very different time commitments, etc. Anyway, I went with
yeah,
Barefoot and I'm really glad I did. Absolutely brilliant. I learned so much more than I expected to. It was transformative for me. It was both the learning and the experience. I think I was in an amazing cohort. So there was 15 of us in our class. And because you're training as coaches, you're practicing on each other. So you're coaching each other all the time. But that also means you're being coached. So not only are you learning to become a coach, you're also having more intensive coaching than you would ever normally have. Admittedly, with we're all amateur at that point. So it was quite had a huge impact on me.
wow,
Yeah, it was absolutely amazing, really amazing. I learned so much. And I guess what they offer on that course, what I particularly liked was it's not one set style of coaching. So instead, they introduce you to many different styles of coaching. And then as a coach, you can sort of draw upon those different styles, or you might choose to learn more about one more than the other. Yeah, so I'm trying to think of examples, but it was, broad range of
yeah,
coaching styles that you can then sort of tailor to your own coaching
yeah.
offering.
And how would you describe your coaching style?
Um, I think in terms of coaching, I'm quite a supportive, nurturing coach. Some of my coaching colleagues are far more provocative, really provoke provoke change, challenge people. That's not really me. I'm more of a great listener, and I will notice what people, not only what they're saying, what they're not saying, and share that with them. And I tend to invite people. I sort of like, okay, I've noticed this. Would it be interesting to explore that further? So I'll offer suggestions, and then go with where the client wants to go, if that makes sense. So I try not to push people more than they're ready for. But if and when they're really ready to really get into the nitty gritty, then we do so. So I think I'm quite a supportive, nurturing coach, and I would say my sessions are fun as well. I think it would be fair to say all of my clients enjoy their coaching sessions, even if they're quite tough sessions. I think it's always an enjoyable hour together. Yeah.
Nice. So how long, like if someone wants to be coached by you, how is it, like if like you schedule once every week, or how does it work? How and do you have a fixed amount of time, or can you go every week for a year, or how does it work?
Again, it varies because I don't have a set process or a set package. It varies. Most often, people come to me for 6 sessions. So I do 1-hour sessions over Zoom. Most often, people will have a package of 6 sessions. That's a good foundation. You know, we will definitely progress their goals during those 6 sessions. And for many people, that's enough. I also have clients who have been with me since I started my business and they're still with me now. And we have a more regular, you know, maybe it's every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. And we're continuing that kind of foundation work. So really embedding those new behaviors. And also sometimes those regular clients, it's a space for them to come and work through what they need to work through. So I have some who, you know, very regular clients, and it's, you know, it's very rewarding to reach that point of familiarity, I guess. But typically 6 sessions. I occasionally do one-offs if people, maybe somebody just needs to make a decision. So maybe they've been approached about another job, for example, and they're like, I don't know what to do. So if I do one-off sessions, they're 90 minutes to give us enough time to get into enough detail. But yeah, usually 6 sessions. For some people, we continue beyond that. So if those 6, you know, we're really making progress, and they would like to continue that work together, then we do. Yeah.
Cool. And going back to leadership again, like how did you approach working with your team when you had a team under you? With, I guess as a leader, you're sort of a coach as well. Like how much do you talk to the people under you, and how often did you have fixed like one-on-ones with your artists, and what do you recommend for other leaders?
I think great questions. The more recent role I was in at DNEG was as global head of compositing. So obviously that's a huge team. And whenever you've got a huge team, I think any teamwork is about every member of the team and surrounding yourself with great people. So I had always worked with brilliant artist managers. So having been an artist manager, you know, I got to a point where then I would train artist managers. So we always had an artist manager in London, and a few people fulfilled that role, and they were all excellent, really excellent. So I think finding the right person and taking the time to train them really well, and then you get to the point where you're coaching them. So, you know, you need to, at first they need to know what is expected of them and how to do it. So it's very sort of directive style, and then you can move into coaching and then move into mentoring. So allow them more autonomy, allow them to make more decisions, allow them to take more ownership, come up with ideas, run these new projects, and you're there to support them and guide them as well, and make sure it's in line with, you know, what the business wants to achieve. Similarly, once the DPM, Department Production Manager role, was introduced, we had a brilliant DPM. So again, then you can start to hand over some of the responsibilities around resourcing and crewing and catching up with all the different shows about their crewing needs. So yeah, as the team grew, it's kind of like, okay, who are my key people? I was very fortunate to have a the title was unofficial, but we basically had a Mumbai liaison who was brilliant as well. And then, so in terms of my one-to-ones, I did make sure I had one-to-ones with my comp soups and my heads of department in the other locations. So I had, I think, a weekly one-to-one with my head of 2D in Mumbai, in Montreal, in Vancouver. So I'm just kind of trying to keep us all coordinated and pulling in the right direction and sharing resources. And they're running their departments in their own locations. And then in London, my main focus, I guess, was often London. Regular one-to-ones with my comp soups, but the frequency would vary depending on what stage they're at, A, in terms of their experience level, and B, in terms of their project. So changing the frequency to suit the needs. Again, that flexible leadership, I guess. But I always had my one-to-ones with them, because again, then I'm relying on them to look after their teams on each project. But they're also, by having a one-to-one, I'm checking in with what's going on, what are the issues, what's going well, hopefully some of that, but what are the issues, how are your crew doing, any concerns, do we need to put in more leads, can we borrow some crew, do we need to hire, can you manage without, what are you developing in terms of pipeline and process, and how can we share that across as a department so that we're not reinventing the wheel. And I also had a tech supervisor as well, who was tasked with being responsible for the tool and pipeline development for our department globally. So again, overseeing regular one-to-ones with them to check their kind of progressing things in line with the business needs as well.
Yeah.
So it's all about the people. It's all about the people.
And how did you approach performance management or performance development? Did you have like a performance review, or did you have how did you do that? Because that was something that I was part of setting up at Important Looking Pirates and tried to figure out how to do this. So how did you think about that?
I think being part of such a big company, such a huge organization, we certainly got to the point where that was an established process. So we had annual reviews, and there was a process for collecting feedback and considering salary reviews, and then meeting with each of the artists. I think as much as possible, though, recognizing that rather than waiting once a year to sit down with people and give them feedback, the more you can feedback at the time, the better. But again, that's something I would be trying to work with my comp soups on, because they're day-to-day supervising the artists. So if they're flagging concerns, then I would support them around, okay, how do we have this conversation? Would you like to have the conversation, or would you prefer me to? So I think as much as possible, trying to manage things as they arise, because then you can resolve them, rather than waiting 6 months later, say, oh, by the way, we thought you didn't do very well on this. But again, it's challenging within a big and busy organization. And often people don't want to raise concern. There's a little bit of a tendency to think, I'm not going to complain about poor performance, I just won't work with them again, which isn't very helpful when you've got a large team. It's not helpful for that individual, because if they don't know they're doing something wrong, how can they get better? And it's not very helpful as a department either. So trying to encourage good practice, and trying to always, if I was made aware of a performance concern, think about, well, how can I help? How can I help the artist, and how can I help the department, and how can I help the show? What do we need to put in place to help this person improve in these areas? And communication again.
Difficult.
It's not. But I think I always found the performance management, career development, certainly one of the most rewarding parts of my role. So trying to identify, what are people great at, what experience do they need to gain in order to really to progress and be brilliant as a supervisor? How can I try and make that happen? How can I help them understand that's what I'm trying to make happen? I'm not just deliberately holding them back. I'm actually thinking longer term and thinking, well, if you can get experience in this, 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 and this, then you'll be a better supervisor. So, bear with me. I'm on your side. It'll be worth it in the long run. I really found that very rewarding. But that's the long game, and that's looking ahead, really looking ahead and thinking, what will we need? So what will we need as a company, and what will that person need in order to be really successful? And trying to plot out that career development. And resisting the temptation to be very reactive and just throw people onto things. So, my natural instinct, I quite like to have a plan. I quite like to have a strategy, to know what I'm doing and why. And that's true for anyone I'm managing as well. So then trying to resist the urge of just throwing it all away because somebody's shouting that they need someone. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And do you have any general advice for artists or leads or supervisors? Like, what is it that sets a great artist apart from someone that is good? Like, have you seen patterns? What are the superstars doing that the mediocre ones aren't?
Some things are hard to teach. That general, genuine creativity, artistic eye, really excellent technical understanding. But I think ultimately understanding you're a part of something bigger. So yes, you have these shots, but they need to sit in the sequence, and the sequence needs to tell the story that the filmmaker wants to tell. So being mindful of context, being mindful of how your shots sit within the picture, communication. That's my buzzword today. But communication. So are you communicating well with everyone around you? Can you help the more junior people? Are you communicating if you're stuck? Are you sharing what you've learned? Are you letting your production team know the status of your work? Are you checking how necessary something is or isn't? I think having that context of you're part of a team, what part your work needs to play and what part you need to play. I think that's ultimately what sets people aside. And realizing that actually it needs to be delivered, coming back to that perfectionism. Yes, it needs to be to a high standard, but ultimately it has to be done. So, the quicker you can show your work to get feedback, the quicker you'll progress it to final. And that's ultimately, everyone wants the shots progress to final, don't they?
Yeah, that's some great advice. But how do you do that when if you're a junior artist on your first job, and you're given a shot? Like, how can you get the context? How do you how do you know who to talk to and stuff like that?
It's this all comes with experience, and I think when you're brand new in a new job, I've always personally, I tend to just observe what's going on around me. So how harder working from home, harder now we're working remotely, but what's going on around me? How do others? What's expected? If I don't know what's expected, who can I ask? So you need to know who your lead is, who your supervisor is, who your coordinator is, because they're your key people, really. And then try and form some professional friendships where you can just check in and sort of say, do you mind having a look? What do you think? When I was a compositor, we would do that all the time in our room. It's like, can you just take a quick look just to get some fresh eyes on something? But I think identifying your key people and understanding what's expected of you. So do you have 5 days on this task, or do you have half a day? Do they want to see a final, or do they want to see a work in progress? And if you're stuck, if you're brand new and you're stuck, put your hand up and ask a question. You're not expected to know everything when you're new, and it's better. I think what's frustrating is when it appears somebody's wasted time sat there silently panicking, so put your hand up, find out what you need to find out in order to be able to do your job. And that's better for you and better for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we've covered a lot of ground now. Is there anything you felt that I missed? Something you're passionate to talk about?
Oh, I don't think so. No, I don't think so, Alfred. It's been really great talking with you. It's been really great talking. We've talked about coaching. We've talked about leadership. We've talked about what to be aware of as a VFX artist. Yeah.
But is there something in the VFX industry that you would change? Like it's such a weird industry, and I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with it, because there's so many issues and like companies closing just after winning an Oscar and stuff like that.
Yeah.
If you could change one thing, what would that be?
I mean, it's a good question. When I sort of said, we've covered everything, I think the workplace environment is absolutely key to everyone's experience. So I think the more we can have an inclusive, collaborative, safe place to work, that for everyone to feel they feel safe, they can be themselves, then you can really contribute your best. And that makes a better working environment for everyone. And that's difficult when there's intense time pressure applied. But I really would love to see a more inclusive workplace for all, a more diverse workplace as well. So we're getting, the benefit of a broader range of people's experiences and backgrounds and cultures. But yeah, that's the change I would love to see.
And how do you think companies can go about getting there? How can we be more open and
I think a bit like what I was saying about leadership, it's the tone that's set at the top. So yes, it will always be a high pressure, demanding industry with exacting standards and tight turnaround. But, we do see examples of really well-run VFX studios, and we see examples of ones that people find difficult to work in. And really, I think that tone is set from the top. So is it about your people? How much are you considering your people as well as your client is probably essentially what it comes down to. And maybe thinking, if I can really build a great team, I'll provide a better service to my client ultimately. So it's win-win, really. To put it in a very simplistic term, that's how I see it.
Yeah. And I've seen many leaders being oblivious to how they're impacting the environment of the company. And I can understand why, because I'm only me. I'm just, but they're not thinking how they're impacting everyone down the line. And I see where my girlfriend works and what she talks about, and how her boss is acting and how everyone else is acting because of that. So I think being more aware as a leader, how much an impact you have actually, and seeing, because your title has some weight, even if I'm still me, I'm still just Alfred. But if I am the CEO of the company, then my word will weigh much more heavily on some junior coming in, or
kind of leading by example, isn't it? I think that's really important.
Cool. And just one final question. I'm working with students now quite a lot, or I'm having a course on, I think it's my unofficial title is to how to get a job in VFX. So I'm trying to actually coach them, and now they're putting together a reel, and I guess you've looked at thousands of reels and had a lot of juniors coming in. Do you have any advice for juniors and that want to get into VFX or interns?
In terms of reels, I think put your best work on there. So it's quality rather than quantity. Be clear about what you've done. So did you do everything in the shot, or did you do a part of it? So be clear about that. Probably put your newest work first. There's an argument, either your best work first or your newest work first, but you want to grab, you're making an impression with your very first shot on your show reel. So you want to make a good impression. It doesn't need to be long. Yeah, it's quality rather than quantity. That would be what I'd say about reels. And I think make as many contacts as you can. It is an industry based on contacts. So go to events, network. They can be online events, but meet people, build that LinkedIn network. Ask people for advice, seek out mentors, and apply. I think, back in my day, I started as a runner. A lot of people now running the VFX industry started as runners. So don't be afraid to start at the bottom. I realize life is expensive, education is expensive. So, we have to be mindful of what's affordable. But if don't be afraid to start in what seems like a lower position, like a roto artist, for example, if you want to become a compositor, because it's still experience. It's still a foot in the door. And the sooner you can begin working with, a decent VFX studio, the easier it will be to sort of progress through your career.
Yeah. And that raised another question. When I did some research, I saw that before you joined Cinesight as a runner, you actually had some on-set experience on a Bond movie.
Wow, you have done your research, Alfred.
What was that about?
Oh my goodness. Oh, well, that was back when I was doing my degree. I had a part-time job while I studied, and I would get a summer job, to earn money. But I was fortunate enough to get an Easter break placement at Leavesden. So I live quite near Leavesden. Somebody knew somebody who knew somebody who was working there on a Bond film. So I got an unpaid placement working with the runners on set. And that was such an education. I mean, it was amazing. I learned so much. It was really eye-opening to be on set for those few weeks. Probably what I learned more than anything, they basically had two full-time runners on set, and I was shadowing them really, was to be so organized that if you weren't there for the day, things can keep running. That was kind of my main takeaway. They had these ring binders of information. So basically, if we're not here, anyone from the production can come in and find the information they need to keep things going. And I was like, that really struck me. But yeah, it was very exciting to be on set as well.
Awesome.
And I think, although I think it helped me get my first job. So I was applying for an entry-level job for about 6 months after graduating. And it feels very frustrating at the time because you've graduated, you're ready, willing and able, but you just need someone to give you a chance. And, I had a number of unsuccessful applications, a couple of interviews, but I think what made the difference when I interviewed at Cinesight was having that on my CV, because it got mentioned in the interview. They asked me about it, and I guess that put me ahead of someone who didn't have that. So I think it did help me get that first job, and then it's all been upwards from there, really.
Yeah. And I guess that experience also, it makes it easier when you're comping on something and the green screen looks like crap, or like, but when you've been on set, then you know that, okay, on set it's all crazy, and
I
then
think
you
it
can
did
have
give me
more
that context that
understanding.
VFX is actually, it really is post-production. And it's within the entire production of a film. It, certainly back then, we're talking the 90s, it's a smaller part of a much bigger production. So being on set for a few weeks gave me that brief experience of, wow, there are so many people here, and time is money, and decisions are being made, and that's what's shot. And then ultimately, whatever needs doing to ensure it looks right in the final film needs doing. So sort of realizing VFX isn't actually the biggest part of many films, certainly not in the 90s anyway. Might have changed a bit
Yeah,
now.
yeah. Which Bond film was it?
Well, now you're asking. I am trying to remember, which is dreadful, isn't it? It's dreadful. I might have to come back to you on that. Yeah.
But awesome. Thank you so much for your time and sharing all this great information and tips and techniques with me and all the listeners.
Oh,
So
Alfred, it's been great. It's been really lovely talking with you. Really enjoyed it.
where can people find you and your coaching?
My website is openframecoaching.com, also .co.uk. I'm on LinkedIn as Debra Coleman and as Open Frame Coaching. They're the main points of contact.
Awesome. Thank you so much for
Great.
joining me.
Thank you, Alfred.